The night Colette Briard stepped between a silver-haired woman and a man's raised fist, she didn't think about the consequences. She didn't think about anything at all. That was the problem with Colette. She never thought before she moved. Her body just went, heavy and certain and completely without permission, straight into the line of fire. The blow caught her across the left side of her face, with a sound like a bat hitting wet wood. She went down hard, and that was the night everything changed. Colette Briard was 26 years old and had been a housekeeping attendant at the Vos Delacroix estate in coastal Maine for 14 months. She was not graceful. She was not quiet. She was 5'4" and 272 pounds, and in the immaculate, hush-toned world of old money and hired help, she was the kind of woman people looked through rather than at. Her uniform, a pale grey dress with white collar and cuffs, had to be ordered in a special size from a supplier in New Hampshire. The buttons across her chest strained slightly when she bent to pick things up. She knew it. The other staff knew it. Everyone smiled and said nothing, and knew it. She had come to the estate the same way most working women with no connections, and a stack of bills came to anything, through desperation dressed up as determination. Her mother had a bad hip and couldn't work. Her younger brother Eli was 2 semesters into a community college degree he was paying for himself. The rent on their apartment in Bangor didn't care about any of that. So when the placement agency called with a position at a private estate on the rocky Maine coast, double the standard rate, live-in, meals provided, Colette said yes before the woman finished the sentence. She had expected rich people. She had not expected Serena. Serena Voss was 71 years old, the mother of the estate's owner, and she was quietly, privately losing her mind. Not in the dramatic, movie way people imagined when they heard the word dementia. It was slower than that, and stranger. Some mornings Serena was perfectly sharp. She'd correct Colette's French pronunciation over breakfast, and laugh at her own jokes, and ask pointed questions about Eli's coursework. Other mornings she stood in the middle of the library staring at the fireplace as if she were waiting for it to tell her something, and Colette would say her name twice, 3 times, 4 times, before the older woman turned around with that particular look in her eyes, half confusion, half terror, that Colette had come to recognize and dread in equal measure. Nobody on staff talked about it. The groundskeeper, a weathered man named Perrin, had been with the family for decades and would not be drawn into any conversation about Serena's health. The head housekeeper, a rigid woman who went by Mrs. Holst, spoke about the matriarch's episodes, the way people spoke about plumbing problems. Something to be quietly managed, never discussed, certainly never escalated. And Serena's son? Raphael Voss did not discuss his mother's condition, because Raphael Voss didn't believe he had anything left to learn about it. He was 41, black-haired, and ran the kind of empire that appeared legitimate from every publicly accessible angle. The Vos Delacroix Group had its fingers in North Atlantic shipping, private equity, and a collection of real estate holdings that stretched from the Maine coast down through the Florida Keys. In financial newspapers, Raphael was described as reclusive and brilliant. In certain private circles, he was described in terms that didn't make it into financial newspapers. He was not cruel, exactly. He was something worse. He was precise. He expected his world to function the way a well-maintained mechanism functioned, correctly, quietly, without friction. When something created friction, he removed it. Colette had watched him fire 2 staff members in her first month, both with the same flat, almost bored expression, the same smooth finality. No anger, no cruelty, just correction. She stayed out of his way. It wasn't difficult. Raphael Voss occupied a different stratum of the estate, the private study, the Upper East Wing, the formal dining room when he had guests. Colette occupied the basement laundry, the guest hallways, the kitchen corridor at 6 in the morning when nobody else was awake, except that Serena kept finding her. The old woman had a habit of drifting out of her rooms in the early hours, drawn by something none of them could name, and she always seemed to end up wherever Colette was. The first time it happened, Colette was ironing pillowcases in the utility room at 5:40 a.m., and Serena appeared in the doorway in her nightgown, looking not confused but purposeful, as if she'd meant to arrive exactly there. "You're the big one," Serena said. Colette set down the iron carefully. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Colette. I do the housekeeping on the East Wing." Serena looked at her for a long moment. "You have kind eyes," she said. "My husband had kind eyes. Most people with kind eyes are frightened of something. What are you frightened of?" Colette had thought about it honestly. "Failing the people who need me," she said. Serena sat down in the folding chair near the door as if she'd been invited, and they'd talked for 40 minutes about nothing in particular. Eli's engineering classes, the smell of the ocean at low tide, a cookbook Serena remembered from her childhood. And then the old woman had let Colette walk her back to her rooms without protest or confusion, as if the whole detour had simply been a matter of needing the right company. After that, Serena sought her out every few days. Colette didn't tell Mrs. Holst. She didn't tell anyone. She just adapted her schedule so she was always somewhere findable in the early hours, always with a blanket within reach, and enough patience to let the silences run long without trying to fill them. She grew to love her. It was not a complicated love, but it was real. The kind that grows between people who see each other clearly, without performance or agenda. Serena had told her once, on a foggy Thursday morning, with both of them sitting on the back step watching the mist come off the water, "You are the most honest person in this house, Colette. Don't let anyone sand that off you." Colette had carried that sentence around in her chest ever since. The gala was Raphael's idea, or rather, it was a necessity he'd wrapped in the appearance of his idea. The Vos Delacroix Group was finalizing a merger with the Aldrin Cross family's shipping interests, and these things required ceremony. They required a setting and a dinner, and the visible presence of both families in the same room looking cordial. It was to be held at the estate on a Saturday in October, when the leaves along the coast had gone amber and deep red, and the Atlantic looked like hammered pewter in the late afternoon light. The household staff worked 7 straight days to prepare. Colette's feet were splitting open inside her shoes by Wednesday. She stopped feeling her lower back on Thursday. She taped her heels on Friday morning without looking at the damage and kept moving, because there was linen to press and floors to polish and 17 bathrooms to turn over before the first cars arrived Saturday evening. She almost didn't make it through the cocktail hour. The ballroom, a long formal room that ran the full width of the estate's south face, overlooking the ocean, was loud in the way only rooms full of people who are performing ease can be loud. Colette moved through the crowd with a tray of small plates, keeping her shoulders in and her eyes down, navigating the bodies the way she'd learned to navigate the estate's narrow service corridors, with patience, without assuming anyone would move for her. She was near the far end of the room when she felt it, the specific, cold certainty that Serena was not where Serena was supposed to be. She scanned the head table. Serena's chair was empty. The woman seated next to it, one of the Aldrin Cross daughters-in-law, Philippa, angular and humorless in a gunmetal gown, was speaking to the man beside her with no indication she'd noticed or cared. Colette set her tray on a side credenza and slipped out through the service door. She checked the conservatory first. Empty. She checked the small sitting room off the east corridor. Empty. She was moving toward the library when she heard it. Not words exactly, but the particular register of a voice being used as a weapon. The library doors were slightly ajar. Colette put her back to the wall beside them and looked through the gap. Serena was seated on the low settee near the window, clutching a shawl with both hands. She looked small in a way she didn't always look, compressed like something being pressed down. Standing in front of her, Still holding a champagne flute, was Aldous Aldrin Cross. He was 63 and built like a man who had once been physically large and hadn't reconciled himself to the fact that he wasn't anymore. He had a red face and white hair and the specific confidence of someone who had never in his life been told, by anyone he respected, that he was wrong about something. "You don't understand what's happening," he was saying to Serena, his voice low but not quiet, the kind of low that carried. "You don't have the capacity to understand, and that's fine, but what I need you to do is stop inserting yourself. The boy doesn't need his mother's opinion. He needs to close this deal." Serena's hands tightened on the shawl. "Raphael listens to me," she said, but her voice had that thin quality it got when she was frightened. "Raphael is being polite." Aldous stepped closer. "There are terms in this arrangement that benefit my family considerably, and I will not have them complicated because you've decided to play matriarch. You had your time. That time is finished. You don't speak to her that way." Serena's voice went up slightly, the way it did when her grip on the present started to loosen. "My husband would never. Bernard would. Bernard is dead." Aldous said it flatly, like a fact being entered into a ledger. "And you are an old woman with a failing mind. Go back to your room." He drew back his arm, not to push, not to gesture. The arm came back the way arms come back when a hand is about to make contact. Colette did not decide. Her body decided. She was through the door before the thought finished forming, crossing the room with her full weight moving fast, putting herself between the old man's hand and Serena's face. The impact was open-palmed and caught her just below the cheekbone, snapping her head hard to the left. She stumbled, caught the edge of the settee, went down on one knee. The room swam. Her ears rang. She felt the specific nauseating pulse of her face beginning to swell. "What?" Aldous stepped back, his face going from rage to confusion to something calculating in the span of 2 seconds. "Serena." Colette kept her voice even. She was kneeling on the library floor, head still ringing, and she kept her voice even. "Look at me. It's Colette. You're safe. I need you to look at me." The old woman's eyes found hers, and the wild, frightened look in them steadied slightly. "Colette," Serena breathed. "I'm right here." Colette reached up and took Serena's hand. Her cheek was already hot. She could feel her own heartbeat in it. "You're safe. Is there something happening in here?" The voice came from the doorway. It was not loud. It had no need to be. Raffle Voss stood at the threshold of his library with 2 men behind him, men whose precise purpose in any room was never stated but always understood. He was still in his dinner jacket, a glass of something dark held loosely at his side. His eyes moved across the room in 3 seconds. Aldous, red-faced and retreating. His mother, shaking, on the settee, and Colette Briard, on her knees on the floor with her hand wrapped around his mother's, and her face already bruising violet and deep red across the left cheekbone. Raphael set his glass down on the nearest surface. Aldous had already begun talking. "Raphael, I want you to understand what happened here. Your mother became agitated. She came at me. This woman ran in out of nowhere, and frankly, I want to discuss the liability issue this creates for." Raphael crossed the room. He walked past Aldous as if the man were a piece of furniture. He stopped in front of Colette, and slowly, with the careful deliberateness of a man, performing an action he intended to be remembered, he lowered himself to one knee on the library floor beside her. "Can you stand?" he asked. His voice was different than she'd ever heard it. Still quiet, it was always quiet, but something in the architecture of it had shifted. "Yes," Colette said. "I'm fine, she needs." "You're not fine." He reached out and angled her chin very gently toward the lamplight. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly when he saw her cheek. He released her. "Can you stand?" he asked again. "Yes," she said, and he helped her to her feet, one hand under her arm, and he did not let go until she was steady. Then he turned around. Aldous. Raphael's voice had returned to its usual register, smooth, uninflected, almost gentle. It was somehow the most frightening thing Colette had ever heard. My mother is a guest in her own home. She was in my library, which is not a meeting room or a negotiating table. He paused. My housekeeper placed herself between your hand and my mother's face. Now listen. The merger is voided. Raphael said it the way other people said the time. Your attorneys will receive paperwork in the morning. My men will see you to your car. The silence in the library was absolute. Aldous' red face went redder, then paler, cycling through colors like something malfunctioning. You cannot be serious. Millions of dollars, Raphael. Years of negotiations. Over this? Not over this. Raphael looked at him with an expression that wasn't anger, wasn't contempt. It was something past both of those, something terminal. Over the fact that you laid a hand on someone under my protection. In my home. In front of my mother, he glanced toward his men. Get him out! The room cleared quickly after that. Aldous Aldrencross left without his wife, who had to be retrieved separately from the ballroom. Both of them ferried off the property in the same car with the specific quiet efficiency of staff who have been trained not to create scenes while creating an exit. The gala continued for approximately 40 minutes after that. The guests redistributed, the music restarted, no announcement made. Raphael Voss reappeared in the ballroom long enough to smile at 2 people and shake 3 hands and then disappear again. He was in the library. Serena had been settled by her personal attendant, taken upstairs with warm tea and 3 different reassurances. The room was empty now except for Raphael and Colette, who was sitting in the chair he'd directed her to, with a wrapped ice pack against her face that she suspected had come from his own private stock, because it was the expensive kind. A cloth sleeve, not a plastic bag. She had tried to leave twice. He had, on both occasions, simply looked at her in a way that suggested she wasn't finished yet. You're going to need a doctor, he said. He was standing at the bookshelf across from her, his jacket off now, his sleeves rolled to the forearm in the careful, deliberate way men rolled sleeves when they were trying to appear less formal without actually relaxing. It's bruised, Colette said. It'll be fine. It may be fractured. He looked at her steadily. There's a physician I use, discreet. He can be here in 40 minutes. Mr. Voss, I really don't need. Colette. He said her name very quietly. It was the first time she could remember him using it. Her whole name, just like that, with no title preceding it. Let me do this. She stopped arguing. The physician arrived in 38 minutes, which told her several things about the kind of man Raphael Voss was that she'd already suspected but hadn't needed confirmed so directly. His name was Dr. Aldrich, and he was grey-haired and efficient, and spoke to her directly rather than around her, which she appreciated. He determined that her cheekbone was not fractured. Badly contused, he said, and the swelling would be significant for several days, and gave her something for the pain that he told her 3 times not to take on an empty stomach. Raphael thanked him. The doctor left. The ice pack had gone lukewarm. My mother, Raphael said, still by the bookshelf. He seemed to have a relationship with that shelf, a place to stand while he was working something out. How long? It was not a question, precisely. Colette looked at her hands. 7 or 8 months that I've known, she said. I don't know how long before I came. What do you mean that you've known? She wanders, Colette said carefully, aware she was navigating something that could go badly wrong. At night, mostly, early mornings. I adjusted my schedule, so I'd be somewhere she could find me when she drifted. Raphael went very still. You adjusted your schedule, he repeated. Yes, for 8 months, yes. He was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the floor, and then at her, and his expression was doing something that his expression, in Colette's experience, very rarely did. It was showing her something real. A fault line opening, just briefly, in the composed and impenetrable surface. Why didn't you tell anyone, he said. It still wasn't a question. Colette considered this honestly. Because she was managing it, she said, and because I thought if it became an official thing, she'd lose the part of her day that was still hers, the part where she got to choose where she went and who she talked to. She paused. She talked to me. I figured that was something she should get to keep. The silence stretched. She talks about you, Raphael said finally. I hadn't connected it. He stopped. She calls you the girl with honest eyes. I assumed she meant one of the kitchen's staff. Colette almost laughed. It came out strange, half swallowed, not quite the right shape for the moment. I'm sorry, she said. I know that probably sounds… No! He shook his head. Don't apologize for that, she didn't. He came across the room and sat down in the chair across from her, not with the practiced ease of a man accustomed to controlling rooms, but with something heavier, more deliberate, like a man who has been carrying something for a long time and is making a decision about whether to set it down. The Aldrin Cross merger was worth $114 million, he said. I ended it 45 minutes ago. Colette looked at him. I'm sorry. I'm not. He said it without hesitation. What I'm telling you is that what you did tonight, what you have been doing for 8 months, without asking for anything, without telling anyone. I see it. I want you to understand that I see it. She didn't know what to do with that. She looked at the ice pack in her hands. I am not. She started and stopped. I'm not looking for… I know, he said. That's why I'm saying it. The next weeks were strange and slow and oddly kind. Dr. Aldrich came back twice to check on her face, which resolved itself from purple to green to yellow, in the order these things do, finally settling into a faint shadow along her cheekbone that she stopped noticing by the 3rd week. Mrs. Holst treated her with a new, slightly baffled deference, as if something had shifted in the private hierarchy of the house, and no one had sent her the memo. The other staff were careful with her in a way they hadn't been before. Not unkind exactly, but attentive in a way that made her feel both seen and slightly watched. Raphael did not ignore her, which was itself a change. He stopped by the east wing hallway one morning, when she was changing a light bulb on a ladder that was slightly too short for her, and he held the base of it without being asked until she was down, and said nothing except "Good morning, Colette," before continuing to wherever he'd been going. He left a note on her door. Not a note, exactly. A formal document from the estate's accounting office, informing her that her salary had been adjusted retroactively for the past 7 months, and the difference had been deposited. She read it 4 times before she believed it. She went to him about it. She found him in the study, and she stood in the doorway holding the document and said, I don't understand this. He looked up from his desk. It's straightforward, he said. You were doing work that was not in your job description for 7 months. The estate compensates for work done. She looked at the paper. This is quite a bit of money. Yes, he agreed. She stood there for a moment. Ellie could finish his degree, she said. It came out involuntarily, the way things did when they were too large to keep inside. Raphael looked at her very directly. Is that your brother? She hadn't thought he knew she had a brother. She hadn't thought he'd paid any attention to her at all. Yes, she said. Engineering. He's really good at it. She stopped. She didn't know how to explain the way money worked when you didn't have it, the way it wasn't a matter of being careful or working hard, the way it was just math, just arithmetic, just a fixed gap between what came in and what went out, and no amount of optimism closed it. Raphael was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I have a structural engineering firm in Portland. We run an apprenticeship track. If your brother is interested. Please don't do that, Colette said. He stopped. Please don't offer me things, she said. Her voice was steady. She was surprised by how steady it was. Because I'll want to believe you mean them, and I'd rather. She looked at the document in her hand. This is already more than I know how to accept. I don't want to become someone who takes things from you. Raphael said nothing for a long moment. Why not? He asked. Because then I'd owe you something, she said. And I don't know what you'd want in return, and I don't. She stopped herself. She had been going to say, And I don't think I could handle finding out it was nothing, that you were just being charitable, that this is just what rich men do with women who've been useful to them. She didn't say any of it. He seemed to hear it anyway. I don't want anything in return, he said, but I understand why you don't believe that. He leaned back in his chair, studying her with the steady, unflinching attention that had unnerved her when she first came to the estate. It was different now. It didn't feel like appraisal. It felt like... She didn't have a word for it. Give me a chance to demonstrate it, he said. That's all I'm asking. She looked at him for a long moment. The October light was low through the study windows, the kind of light that made everything look slightly amber, slightly warmer than it was. Okay, she said. It did not happen quickly. That was the thing she hadn't expected. She had read enough stories to know how they were supposed to go. The sudden declaration, the transformed circumstance, the clean before and after. What happened instead was smaller and more honest than that. It was Raphael appearing in the kitchen on a Sunday morning when the main staff was off, making coffee very badly and accepting her help without pretending he didn't need it. It was Serena taking both of their hands one afternoon and saying with perfect lucid clarity, "I'm very glad you found each other," and neither of them correcting her. It was a conversation at the edge of the lawn at dusk, both of them looking at the water, that lasted 2 hours and covered, in no particular order, his father's death and her mother's hip, and the specific silence of 5 in the morning, on a coast where the nearest town was 11 miles away, and what that silence felt like when you were alone in it versus when you were not. He told her things she understood he did not tell people, not as confession, not even as trust, quite, but as something he was trying out cautiously to see if she would stay. She stayed. He told her once, in the library, always the library, that room they had come to together in the worst possible moment and somehow made into somewhere else. "You're the only person in this house who's never wanted anything from me." "I want things," Colette said. She had learned by then to push back gently. "I want my mum's hip to stop hurting. I want Eli to graduate. I want to stop dreaming about laundry." He almost smiled. He had a careful smile, not reluctant exactly, but considered like something he'd learned to ration. "You know what I mean." "I know what you mean," she said. "But I think you've spent so long around people who want things that you've started to think of nothing as a safe place." "It's not." She looked at him directly. "I want things from you too. I just want different ones." "Like what?" She thought about it. "Honesty," she said. "You to stop pretending the thing between us isn't there." The careful smile broke open into something real and unpracticed and slightly startled, and it changed his face in a way that made her chest ache in the particular way. Chests ache when they are in danger of getting what they want. "I'm not pretending," he said quietly. "I know," she said. "I'm just telling you that you're allowed to stop." He reached across and took her hand, not with drama, not with declaration, just that, her hand, in his with the Atlantic outside and the library around them, and Serena probably sleeping upstairs and all the complicated machinery of his world, sitting exactly where it had been, unchanged and awaiting. It didn't fix anything, that hand. It didn't simplify anything. It didn't make the distance between their lives any less improbable, or the world outside any less tangled, or the question of what happened next any less unresolved. But it was real, and for Colette Briard, who had spent 26 years being the woman people looked through, being something's real was more than enough to start.